Today is November 12th, 2023. Welcome to Native Calgarian. Oki, Naganago, Mekoche, Chestokom Aki, or Dekots Nagot Tine Siku. Hi, my name is Red Thunder Woman. My married English name is Michelle Robinson, and I use she and her pronouns. I honor the Blackfoot as the elders and members have been so kind to me on my Red Road journey. Elder Red Crane taught me how to pronounce my spirit name in Blackfoot, and Leonard Kenny taught me how to pronounce my spirit name in Satu Dene. My humblest apologies to the Blackfoot and Dene elders and language keepers as I try to learn proper pronunciation. My Dene lineage roots me in the land of the Great Bear Lake tribe in Treaty 11. My people wore rabbit skin, so it's been referred to as the land of the hare people. I'm a native to Turtle Island, and my Dene nation is a visitor to this area of Clincho Tine Indahe in Satu Dene, meaning Many Big Dog Town, named after the Calgary Stampede. I was born in Calgary or in Blackfoot Mokinstis as Michelle Elliott, an English name that has afforded me privilege in an English colonial world. My mother is Northern Slavey Dene or Satu Dene, but my Indian Act imposed status card imposed by the Canadian government says Yellowknives Dene. Through my father, I am a daughter of the Mayflower and a daughter of the American Revolution, while having a Canadian Indian Act imposed status card. It's a colonial construct by Canadian policies meant to divide Indigenous peoples' inherent rights. Indigenous Two-Spirit or the Indigenous 2S LGBTQ community and the Indigenous women are at the bottom of the Canadian socioeconomic ladder because of colonial trauma, imposed poverty, racism, gendered violence, and land theft. According to the 2023 Quality of Life Report from the Calgary Foundation, 31% of racialized Calgarians cannot find suitable unemployment. I do not speak on behalf of all Indigenous, but I sure can share my journey. As a Dene woman who has attempted to run, joined harmful colonial parties, spent money to be at expensive conventions, left my home to travel to those conventions just to vote on incomplete policies that still allow for the incarceration and denial of justice, denial of health services, racism, colonial trauma, and genocide of Indigenous and Black peoples, I have worked to continue, reports to advocate for, and attempt to work within these systems meant to harm me and my community. I think of all of this today as we honor the many Indigenous lives lost for this so-called country named Canada. I hope you see your role in the importance of stopping harm, and as a citizen, see your role in reconciliation and as a treaty partner. Pride Month should never just be 1 month. It's important to understand the straight agenda and gendered violence was and is forced on this lands by Christian outsiders and now kind of perpetuated by other religions. I'm going to get more into that. Land acknowledgements are critical for creating a safer space for Indigenous as well as honoring the host as a guest and acknowledging your role as a treaty partner in a so-called time of reconciliation. It's important land acknowledgements have meaning. I encourage all to introduce themselves with an acknowledgement of their ancestors, stories of displacement, and how you perceive your role as a treaty partner, a citizen of Canada, a refugee, or other land displacement, so we as Indigenous peoples know how safe you are to be around. If you don't know how to pronounce your local Indigenous nation's names, won't say your pronouns, won't say your story of origin, won't acknowledge stolen lands, won't acknowledge imposed economic oppression, or your role in reconciliation, I determine how safe you are to be around my community, my family, and myself. Understanding land acknowledgements and their importance is Indigenous 101 because it immediately addresses colonialism, oppression dynamics, broken treaties, and lies taught today in Canadian schools nationally. That's why settlers and those who call themselves Native Calgarians or whatever town you're from, you show me you have no Indigenous 101 understanding. Jesse Winty's book Unreconciled explains this perfectly, as do many Indigenous authored books. Land Back is a movement that could save the planet from climate change created by colonialism, but it would also be a part of a treaty partnership, part of meaningful reconciliation, and honoring global initiatives like the United Nations Declaration on Rights of Indigenous People. I'm speaking to you on the lands of the Niitsitapi, which is the Blackfoot Confederacy. The Blackfoot south of the imposed U.S.-Canadian border are the Blackfeet, and north of the border are the Siksika, Kainai, and Bagani of the Confederacy. These lands are Treaty 7. They were signed in September of 1877 with signatures that included the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Goodstoney, Chiniki, and Bearspaw nations of the Stoney, and the Dene from Tsuut'ina. I acknowledge all First Nation, Métis, Inuit status and non-status across Turtle Island as the keepers of these lands. All non-Indigenous are treaty partners, with the government signing on your behalf. My Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you can pledge and support. Thank you, previous donors, for showing your support. If you value listening or watching and can afford to give, thank you. For those who cannot afford to give, I'd love to hear from you at nativeyyc@gmail.com, where you can send in your comments or questions. Also, giving a review helps, whatever medium you're listening from. I have a YouTube channel that you can go and subscribe. You can go to nativecalgarian.com for the latest podcasts, the pin posts on social media, but also, if you absolutely want me to come talk, then you can hire me through there. I think it's really important that people understand the reason why I talk about land acknowledgements is because of my history in geomatics. And what's unfortunate is because people don't get it, what has now happened is enough Indigenous people are like, yeah, I don't really want you saying any land acknowledgement because you don't tell your story of origin, you don't acknowledge any of this economic oppression, etc. And now you've just pissed off natives. And it sucks because, I think that it has started a dialogue that I haven't seen in the 10 years that I've been talking about Palestine with folks, that's for sure. And I think that, until Canadians really understand the gravity of Canada being a settler colonial construct, they're not going to understand these land acknowledgements. And it is shocking to me how people will go out of their way to avoid that truth. And all I've been talking about the last little while is about racism coming from settler colonialism. The other day there was a, wannabe, really edgy type of art group that put out this, mock City of Calgary sign, and it said, oh, here's how you build an igloo to deal with houselessness. And everybody was like, it's just a joke. And I'm like, it's not funny, it's racist. And like, the city that I live in is so racist, and they weren't willing to listen to that context. So I had people that I know many of you follow and retweet and share, they were the ones actually attacking me. They were attacking me on Twitter. They were making all sorts of jokes. They were making jokes about the sign prior and not recognizing and realizing how upsetting it was. I actually had one of my cousins from Yellowknife reach out to me and say, hey, have you seen the sign, after being tagged in this multiple times? And, I really am not happy that this, art group tried to do this work and raise a spotlight on the fact that Indigenous people are houseless, because they actually didn't care that it's over representative Indigenous people. Just like every racist settler, they're just like, oh, we really like an idea of an igloo, so we're just going to steal that concept, or appropriate it and make it part of our edgy look at us, we're such good artists sign. And it's not cool. It wasn't funny. It wasn't great. It didn't do what it wanted to do, because people were more focused on trying to take space. They were more focused on saying Michelle's wrong, and they're more focused on not totally not acknowledging the fact that, like, folks like me, my listeners know I've been talking about houselessness on this podcast forever, and none of them recognize that. None of them reach out to the Indigenous community. They just exploit us. They exploit us with their art, their edgy art, and it sucks. So much so that even my family up north was upset. So, and I had, I thought the Inuit population were going to speak out about it, but it was just enough for me, and I did, and all of the so-called progressives, but I actually just called them racist settlers, because that's what they are. If you're so committed to trying to own me on something, well, it's not an official city sign. It doesn't matter. This city is so racist that you all thought it was funny, appropriate, and totally okay to appropriate Indigenous culture, like as you always do, and totally miss the point that they're just being racist settlers again. But like I said, and racist settlers will go like bend over backwards, become liquid to try to not acknowledge their racism and their settler state mentality. Well, anything to avoid it, right? So anyway, I was interviewed by City News, and I think I can really only share that on Twitter. I don't know how to share that on like my YouTube or on the podcast, but I basically tried to explain it. A lot of it was cut, as I mean, you can only have like a minute or two on these news things anyway. So unfortunately, not all of it was really laid out there. But at the end of the day, so many people really outed themselves. Edgy artists who are racist, settlers, just appropriating Inuit culture. And I said, I built snow forts all the time when I was a kid. You could have used the term snow fort, but no, you had to appropriate it. You had to say igloo. And it was just gross to see that. Anyway, I'm just kind of, sick and tired of Canadians going out of their way to be racist. And when I say that, I think people don't understand. Like, they don't understand Indigenous or oppressed at all. They don't understand the concept. So they have no problem attacking Indigenous because they don't recognize, like, you're really punching down. So they think they're hysterical. They think they're funny, but they don't understand you're punching down. And like, I did a call out for this Palestinian solidarity march. And like, again, the organizers not understanding the gravity of what they're asking Indigenous people. And unfortunately, I know some of the organizers, I've known them for 10 years. They like are purposely misunderstanding, or like there's no nicer way to say it. So I definitely struggle because I can't stand the genocide that's happening. I can't stand Canada not wanting to recognize their settler racist state. I can't stand the fact that, we have this horrible atrocity happening, and the average Canadian not paying attention. I was doing some phone banking for a political party. Not one person brought it up, not one. So there's a huge disconnect when it comes to caring about oppressed people. When it comes to Canadians, they just can't help themselves. They're just like, they think everything's roses and sunshine. So they don't care that Indigenous are homeless. They don't care that they're a racist settler state. And they certainly don't care when other racist settler states are committing genocide on not white people. They just don't care. If had they been white, I'm sure they would care a lot more, as we've seen with Ukraine. But because they're not white, people could not care less. And it is infuriating to watch. Mansour, one of my friends that I've met over time, he recently left Calgary to go to Palestine. And of course, he's like, I think I'm just going to say this to my listeners. I don't think you can understand how what they're going through. I mean, I can't possibly understand, but that this bigger picture that I keep seeing of the small interviews that I do see that are coming out of there, even if you want to live, that's not the point to them. They don't want to die martyrs. But when you have a skill set, let's say you're a doctor and you know how to do any type of surgery, and you see people who need all the surgery, you don't want to leave them. And my friend Mansour isn't like, these are literally his brothers, his sisters, his cousins, his people. He doesn't want to leave there. So his wife and his kids, he has four kids, 5 kids. They just got out. I mean, I was like sick all week waiting for them to get out, and they finally got out. But understandably, they wanted their dad. And I understandably understand why he can't leave. He has to report. So for folks who aren't paying attention, this is an unprecedented amount of journalists being murdered by the oppressive state. Um, I just retweeted the UN. They have never had this many people die in a conflict before. I can't even put out all the Geneva Conventions that are regularly being violated right now. I cannot understand how everybody's okay with it, but I also understand that I don't look at life through a white supremacist, racist, settler state lens, and they do. And that's why. Like when you talk about intersectionality, so many people who are brown absolutely understand what's wrong and are fighting for Palestine. But that said, because so many universities have said, no, you're not allowed to say this. Here in Calgary, we had one of our main organizers actually get charged. And the the expression from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, was added on as hate speech. Now, for anybody who knows what that is it's actually a freedom call. Nobody hates Jewish people. Nobody wants Jewish people eliminated. There is a far right fascist group of evangelical Christians and far right Jewish population of Zionists that are combined together with their religious belief system that are creating the most fascist, ugly talking points, that anything that you say that is not pro-Jewish is anti-Semitic, and not even pro-Jewish, pro-Israel, pro-Zionism. It's anti-Semitic, and that's not true. I was just sharing some speeches on Twitter that happened today. Ronnie Lay, she is Jewish and she does women's studies. Um, she's a professor, an academic at that. She's Jewish. Miriam um, Mir, she is our Jewish friend who's older than Gaza. She's 80, no, 92. She's 92 and she's still out there doing activism because she was a Jewish nurse and she's seen the plight of the Palestinians and has been on the Palestinian side ever since. There's independent voices, independent Jewish voices. I just shared their information. That there are so many Jewish people that are speaking out against this genocide that's happening in Palestine. So for folks who are paying attention, I implore you to. Another group I've been sharing are Queers in Palestine. Back to the intersectional component. A lot of people say, well, any of the LGBT in Palestine would be murdered. And it's like, yeah, well, they're all being murdered now, regardless of their being straight or not. And what I've been learning from Queers in Palestine and other queer voices is that actually that a lot of that stuff is actually not true. So here in Canada, I would argue gendered violence is the absolute standard norm. And, people are murdered all the time under the, umbrella of intimate partner violence. And, the 2S LGBTQ community are disproportionately committing suicide. I know people like to use the term unalive, and I apologize for using the S word, but yeah, at the end of the day, we have a disproportionate amount of violence happening to the 2S LGBTQ community here. And quite frankly, you're seeing this small sect of right-wing conservatives going after what we call the SOGI 1, 2, 3 curricula that has been developed to try to create an understanding of healthy sexuality, and they're attacking that. They're trying to get rid of that. They call it a woke agenda, and I am just so disappointed with people's perception that like queer Muslims don't need protection. And in fact, I haven't been invited back to speak because I do speak about the 2S LGBTQ community. And I did talk to another friend of mine who happens to be a part of the community who was directly told not to talk about it. So, it's it's so hard to me to want to support what's happening locally in some aspects because they don't recognize their settler state um, biases, even here in Canada. Yet they demand of Indigenous people to show up and to dance and to drum when they've literally never showed up to any of our events ever. So this week, speaking of which, okay, before I go back to that, more intersectionality, like that's the point. A lot of brown people in Canada do not understand that they have inherited racist settler belief systems with and have anti-Indigenous bias because to them, Canada is great. Canada is wonderful. And they're right, to them it is. They may consider themselves second-class citizens because they experience racism all the time, but they are still a higher elevated group of people over Indigenous people because of the way the policies are set up in Canada. So, it's really unfortunate to not have people really understand the gravity of that. But of course, solidarity shouldn't be conditional. So I've been showing up regardless because it matters. And this particular day, we were asked to show up in regalia and drum if possible. So I did make a Facebook event and, took some screenshots and showed it on all my social media. I'm well aware that my social media is being suppressed. It does every time that there's some type of action like this. It happened with Idle No More. It happened with other Palestinian conflict issues. So, like, it just happens all the time. And a lot of folks don't know and don't see it because they just don't care because they have their, racist settler belief systems and everything is biased towards them. So, anyway, I guess a bit of an upside was a few members of the Reconciliation Action Group who are settlers trying to start to do this work. We're seeing that. And that was, I mean, I've been saying this for years and years, but it just goes in one ear and out the other. But they finally got to witness it firsthand how it was working in their feeds and how they couldn't comment at times. And so that made me happy that at least it was being seen for the first time through their eyes. Now, all of my friends who are Indigenous, we all go through this all the time, so we know this. But I think for non-Indigenous, they're like, "Oh my God, what? I had no idea." Their privilege, as usual. So, that's just the way it works. But that was the good part. The Reconciliation Action Group, we had an action actually on, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday, and we put out a press release. We had told some of our activist friends beforehand that this was going to be happening and that we'll put out the press release because we didn't really want the Catholic school division to have a heads up on it. And so we did our action in front of there, and thank you to Albert Wu for all of the great work he does with us and taking pictures so that we have some sort of documentation of it. We did get coverage, I guess, with Global and City News. I don't remember if it was good or bad. I kind of get it mixed up sometimes. But what did matter to me was that the family that was being targeted by the Catholic school board system said that they felt some healing, some joy, some happiness seen, that type of thing. Now, that said, even though we have the Métis Nation of Alberta supporting us because this was a little Métis boy that was attacked, we have this like man who says he's Native, but he just, man, he was attacking us on social media. Again, not the first time. We're just getting harassed by this guy. And the amount of Canadians that are just like totally okay with Indigenous women and a reconciliation group being targeted and nobody saying or doing anything, you know. It's been really hard, for folks who don't know, our organizer from last week got charged with that expression, "From the land to the sea, Palestine will be free," and we've seen Adora Nufar and Taylor McNally get charged, and him get charged, and I have a friend who does harm reduction work, and he's being scrutinized by the police. And it's kind of at the point where it's like any good that had been built up seems to be just being taken away in an instant because of these charges. I mean, yeah, I talked to how many people in these communities that will never trust the police now. So now we have a whole new generation that will never forget these things. And that's where we're at. So all of this community building, I've been praying for the liaison who's Brown. I won't say his name here, but I've been praying for him all week because I know his community that he's been trying to build relations with the police are just in so much pain this last week. And the young man, Wasim, who's been targeted now by the police, like he has national support, but it's not the point. The point is, if you're an organizer in Canada and Calgary specifically, and you're not white, you're going to get charged. And as Stop the Stack YYC has shown so well with Dora and Taylor, that they just throw charges at you until you're done and you're labeled as a criminal. You know, they already have that bias to call us savages in some capacity. And I'm seeing that being played out against the Palestinians right now. And I just wish people would realize that these are racist propaganda techniques, speak out against them. And what is happening is that people are too afraid to speak out because it will hurt their career. You know, this is what happened in Germany, was that nice people said nothing. Nice people were just doing their job. Look what happened. So it's a sad time. I'm really sad for I had more hopes and aspirations that all of the diversity work that we had been doing would lead to very different charges from very different people. Today I seen Craig Chandler from the conservative right wing out with the Israelis, the pro-Zionists, and they have their professional lawn signs that were done. And we've seen all across social media that they have to be paid to be there. It's just so disappointing that so many people aren't paying attention. So it was nice to see some white people on our side. That's good. I would argue in a city of 1 million people, it should be much higher on a Sunday afternoon. That's part of the reason why it is on Sunday afternoons, because you know, you can't use the excuse that you have work, but here we are, at least with the Reconciliation Action Group. I would understand if people did that, but you know, we didn't even get messages or have people amplify our event or anything like that. So it is what it is. And, you know, at the end of the day too, my solidarity, I know it's right and wrong. So I'm going to stand with the trans community. I'm going to stand with the 2S LGBTQ community. I'm going to stand with Palestinians. I'm going to stand with Muslims. I'm going to stand with the Brown community on these issues. I'm going to stand with Black people on Black Lives Matter, even though none of them show up to our events. You know, with Sunny Crazy Bull, Tammy Crazy Bull, that vigil, yeah, there was a lot of snow and it was a snow day, but I don't think people had the intention of coming anyway, just judging by the lack of sharing the event, telling other people, posting, all this stuff. You know, like it's just, it's interesting seeing people pretending to be activists on these different platforms and yet not showing up when it matters, right? Anyway, it is what it is. I know it's right, so I'm going to show up to these things. And hopefully one day people, Canadians, will see that they are the ones perpetuating a genocide on Indigenous people, and that they have such a strong racist belief system that's why they have no problem attacking me on social media or whatever, or not amplifying if you are in solidarity, etc. So anyway, our family from the Reconciliation Action Group, did feel supported by the few of us who did show up. So again, if you do care about Indigenous issues, follow the Reconciliation Action Group, because that's where we're trying to do a lot of that work, because it's exhausting work and we need multiple hands, not just a few. And the Indigenous community, we're burying our people left, right, and center because of the drug toxicity that Canada allows to continue. It's so depressing. I was listening to CBC and they actually had like MPs from across the country of all different party affiliations talking about how they were personally affected by somebody that they know who has died from this drug poisoning, yet they refuse to do anything. All week, people are demanding a ceasefire. They will not do it. They won't come out and say it. I just thought by this time last week, after I found out Wessam got charged, that it was the UCP changing something. But for folks who don't know, Mickey Emery, who happens to be brown, even though he has red hair and looks white, he's not. His dad was the previous MLA for that area, and Mohammed Emery, and they're Muslim. So, I, the idea that Mickey Emery would have to change from the land to the sea, like I cannot imagine him doing that. That would be like just thinking about it's ridiculous. So thankfully, it's not the UCP. I don't know if it was the city that was going to do it or what, but anyway, I'm hoping, praying that it's not going to be illegal to say these things. Like, we talk about freedom of expression, like all these stupid freedom convoy guys, like this is where it's so clearly racist. They're not showing up to these things saying, yeah, this is wrong. People should be allowed to say this chant. And then all lives matter, not just Black matters, or not just Indigenous lives matter. They're sure silent on Palestinian lives mattering. Holy. So anyway, I did post a little bit about what happened today on Twitter, and I wanted to give a shout out to a few folks who showed up. So a good friend of mine, Alicia, she showed up in a jingle dress, and she was the one who danced. There was another friend of mine who brought a drum, another friend who didn't bring her drum, but her husband had a drum, so she ended up using that drum. So there were a few of us that were drumming, and we were trying to create a barrier from the Israelis to the Palestinians, because it is very clear that the pro-Zionists are trying to bait protesters to say something so that they can, cry anti-Semitic when there's nothing there. And we've seen that in a Concordia conversation where it was going around that one of the Muslim women had said the K word, which is the worst word I'm never going to say. And it turned out she didn't. She actually said the C word, which you can't say C word in Canada, for folks who know what I'm talking about. But there was other violence at that same event as well. And that's what they want, right? Like, to make it seem like Muslims are violent savages, because that has been the propaganda since I was alive. So we're not supposed to like brown people. We're not supposed to like Muslims. We're not supposed to like Palestinians. And you're seeing really bad white supremacist commentary coming from like mainstream news. Even their coverage, I shared a CTV analysis of it, of all of their coverage, and they have a disproportionate amount of Israelis, and they have a the words that they use. Even our local activist Simon Jamal said that when she was asked to speak on CTV, there was 3 other Israelis to her one voice. So, and she didn't get to rebuttal the other voices. So, the bias is so clear. And I wish that Canadians would see that and pay attention to it. So anyway, CTV News is the apparently more watched news. So that's why it's so disappointing and why it's so important to bring it up. Anyway, I think that covers everything for today, but next Sunday, they were saying that they were gonna move it till 3 so that the pro-Zionist Israeli side can have their own shindig on the one side, and then, the Palestinians will have theirs on the other side. So, I would say avoid the area if you're not participating, but at the same time, why aren't you participating? Like, you have a genocide happening in front of you. How can you just be like, "Yeah, it's fine, it's cool, whatever." I did learn some things. I put out quite a long TikTok about this. For folks who don't know, Israel had outlawed the Palestinian flag at one point. So a lot of people would use a watermelon as a symbol of solidarity because it has all the colors of the Palestinian flag, and apparently they grow and eat watermelons. So, and for folks who don't know, olive trees are multi-generationally looked after by families, and Israel knows that. So they'll burn a 1,000-year-old olive tree in front of a Palestinian family to take away their food source, to take away their economic source, and to also claim the land as racist settlers. So, olives, if you'll see me posting about olives, that's what that's about as well. Um, and the biggest thing I learned that I didn't know prior was that the poppy is actually the official flower of Palestine. So I really was not feeling good about Remembrance Day because we has forces that well, we always have forces that help Israelis. That's the settler states, how we work all together, right? So, our, task force went in like on the first part of it. And, so I was feeling sick to my stomach about Remembrance Day. And, because here we have genocide happening, like actual genocide. Anyway, when I found out that Palestine's official flower was the poppy, I felt so much better about wearing it and seeing it. But I had a veteran from Okotoks on Twitter attacking every brown, black woman on the internet for not wearing poppies. So I said, well, are you even aware that this is a thing? And I don't think he's used to getting called out on his, sexist racism against brown women. So anyway, I just thought it was something that people are unaware of. And ironically enough, even before that, I seen, and I won't name the party, they put out their official picture of all of them hanging out, and some of them had poppies, some of them had poppies on the wrong side. So you're supposed to have a poppy over your heart, folks. Although that was yesterday and that's over. Yesterday I went to Bankhead. I always go to Bankhead because Bankhead is a town that no longer exists. It was a small mining town that took over the lands by Banff in Minnewanka, and they shut it down. And there's foundations there, so a lot of folks that come to Lake Minnewanka will see these remnants of Bankhead. Anyway, they have a beautiful memorial for the Great War, and so I always go there because nobody goes there ever, and because our family goes and we go every year. There's a man who's from Holland, and he lives out in Canmore. His wife teaches in Saudi Arabia, and we get to have a little ceremony, just a private one. And I always bring my phone and play Last Post. And I got to see him again, and I'm hoping his wife will come home, and then that way, I'm worried for her. And I said that to him, and he said she should be okay. And it doesn't sound like she rocks the boat too much on this issue, but at the end of the day, I'm it's weird having a friendship with someone. I only see him once a year. And this particular year, Darcy was unable to attend. He had podcasting to do with Freedom's Path. And then my daughter is, yeah, she's 16. She doesn't, you know, they had a late night. So getting up early to go travel all the way to Lake Minnewanka wasn't her cup of tea. So I just went by myself, but at least I got to see my Dutch friend there. And we got to honor the small group that did go for the Great War and is honored there. So, and he said to me that Parks Canada does do some sort of ceremony, but to me, they're never there on November 11th at 11 a.m. So to me, it's important for me to always go there. And especially as somebody who's, enjoyed Lake Minnewanka as a scuba diver and taught folks how to scuba dive there and got to play on the dam underwater and such. So to me, it's important to honor that. But it's a weird time when you think about it because, the Great War happened just after the dispossession of the Stony in that area and the Blackfoot. So they weren't allowed in anymore in that area, and Parks Canada had taken it over, yet had little mining town of Bankhead. It's just so wild to think how settler colonialism works and how towns can come and go based off of settler colonialism economic decisions. And anyway, it is what it is. So I didn't mean to take up so much time with that. Next week is a lot of events for leading up to Trans Day of Remembrance, so like trans awareness in general. And on the 20th is Trans Day of Remembrance. So they're going to have the actual names that have been lost over the course of the year on the 19th. And then on the 20th, there's going to be a sacred fire. So I'm going to take a shift of that. You may have seen me share that. If you want to participate at all, just contact, I usually share the organizers of whatever is being done in the hopes that people will contact them if they want to learn more about what to do. So I hope, as far as I know, Sunday and Monday are both a go. I have 2 casinos this week for Abbeydale Community Association. I always look forward to casino food, so that I am looking forward to. And what else? There was other things I was going to talk about. I can't remember, but tomorrow I do have a book club. Oh, oh my God. So started reading this National Action Plan. It's actually worse than I thought it was going to be. So for folks who've listened before, we did the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Two-Spirit National Inquiry reports and segments. And I'm like, it was so great. Why do we need a national action plan on gendered violence? Yeah, no, it's not just whitewashed, it's racist whitewashed using terminology like stakeholder. Then I had somebody like, oh my God, I didn't know stakeholder was racist. And I'm like, I have a background in geomatics. You want me to give you all of this? Why is racism and settler colonialism so missed by Canadians? They just don't know. Anyway, so I am annoyed, more annoyed than you can possibly imagine. I was actually sharing a thread on Twitter with screenshots from it where they actually would talk about oppression dynamics while we're in the 3rd week of these attacks on Gaza, where there's a genocide happening, and Canadians like, well, we recommend that you read about oppression dynamics, and they so clearly don't get it. Anyway, really struggling with that. So tomorrow I'm sure will be lots of fun at book club. Maybe other people will have something positive to say that will help me feel a lot better about them. So anyway, look for the next 2024 book club selections. I'm going to try to put that together by the end of tomorrow so that way people know what to grab and to read. I don't know what to say about it anymore. I'm so freaking annoyed about all of it. Ay, ay, ay. I'm proud that this podcast has given solutions and included cultural safety and cultural first aid and all of them to create a safer space for Indigenous people of color, those with disabilities, and 2S LGBTQ to speak. According to the 2023 Quality of Life report from the Calgary Foundation, 88% of racialized Calgarians feel uncomfortable or out of place because of religion, ethnicity, skin color, culture, language, accent, gender, sexual orientation, and that is up from 75% in 2023. And I'll be curious after this Israeli Palestinian issue how much more that'll go up from 88%, because it nobody's happy now. Nobody. Anyway, 84% of racialized Calgarians believe racism exists, and why that's not 100%, I'll never know, versus 66% of non-racialized Calgarians. Like, seriously, they don't even know the half of it, of that 66%, because they perpetuate it all the time as settler colonizers, but they don't even see it because their anti-Indigenous bias is so strong. Anyway, I want to say thank you to Cheryl Ward, Chelsea Branch, and Alicia Fritkin of heretohelp.bc and .ca. They have a great section on what is Indigenous cultural safety and why I should care about it. That work are cultural action tools. So please support work like that as part of your reconciliation work and settler understandings. I'm just lucky enough to highlight and repeat them here. Another great resource that I just absolutely love is from Donna Bevins. I wish you would all go to racialequitytools.org and give her all the money because she deserves it. Anyway, she has talked a lot about different forms of racism. And I think folks who don't know what internalized racism is and lateral violence are the very folks that need to focus on it the most, because they perpetuate it the most. What does that even mean? That means rather than attacking the, institutions of racism, so the, police, the justice, the education, governance, whatever it is, rather than putting the energy towards that, we start beating up on each other. And it's easier and you get further, and it sucks because if you're trauma informed, that is trauma from colonial violence. But most people clearly don't know what that is because they're not paying attention to what is happening in their own life. Like, Palestinians and Muslims, it's against the law to adopt other kids. Why is that? Because that's cultural genocide. It's actually part of the definition of genocide. But in Canada, it is so normalized because of racist colonial belief systems, settler belief systems, to just adopt other kids and raise them as your own. And it's such a mind fuck if you were to ever meet folks who are from different cultures being raised in the wrong culture and what that does, and especially in a society that refuses to deal with racism and settler colonial belief systems bias, anti-Indigenous bias. It's so gross. So God, everybody, stop what you're doing and start learning about racism. So racialequitytools.org. She has resource files and a part on what is internalized racism. Unpack it daily, please. Do's and don'ts for bystander intervention by American Friends Service Committee. So afsc.org, and do's and don'ts bystander intervention. That will help you know what to do when you see somebody being attacked. Obviously, you don't do it on Twitter. I wish anybody that follows me on my social media would watch Anti-Racism Organizational League from the City of Calgary giving the internal committee a presentation on the journey of becoming an anti-racism leader. Really easy for everybody to do. Anyway, Stop the Stack YYC is doing great work at trying to educate and defend our Calgary Black Lives Matter activists, Taylor McNally and Adora Nofor, for being legally targeted. So please go support their work as well. Want to see more letters from folks on that, more TikToks. What's going on, folks? Indigenous have been talking about our issues, sharing our traumas and reports, commissions, and public hearings, just so it can be regularly disregarded. No more. Honor our words, honor the treaties, listen to politicians and their platforms and policies. If they don't recognize equity seeking groups in their budgets, if they don't recognize gender equity plus, if they're cutting violence prevention programs and services, Indigenous education, uterus health choices, gay straight alliances, lack of human rights for migrants, immigrants, folks with disabilities, know that your vote to that party directly negatively impacts marginalized people. Demand that they implement the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action, the recommendations of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, the multiple reports about child welfare reform, violence prevention programs, 231 calls to justice from the National Inquiry. Provincially, there's 113 pathways to justice. Municipally, we have the White Goose Flying Report. Denying all these reports is a form of abuse called gaslighting. And I heard the Palestinians talking about feeling gaslit. So I know you all know what the word means. Our people are experiencing extreme racism from the educational, justice, health, governmental institutions, everything, with multiple reports that say the same thing. Demand change from election platforms and politicians. If they don't understand colonialism, racism, privilege, sexism, they have zero business running. Should be understood by all parties, local politicians, community organizations, sports clubs. Google articles on how non-Indigenous Canadians can become allies. So easy. I'm just going to give a shout out to George Chahal. I feel like you're trying, and I see you, and I wish more politicians would be willing to put that out there, what you're putting out there on Palestine and Israel. Stephanie Harp reached out, actually, was looking for resources about good places for women to stay. So if you're a person that listens and you have a recommendation here in Calgary on where to stay if you're fleeing violence, I'd love to hear from you. Homelessness in general, we're looking for folks who are pregnant, just about to have a baby, don't have stable housing. Anyway, I talked about this statement about demanding urgent action to protect the lives of Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit, and gender diverse people experiencing homelessness. That was found at womenshomelessness.ca, but nobody wrote about it. But they made stupid signs about igloos. Way to go, Calgary. Anyway, you can also sign up for aboriginalalert.ca. That shows the latest missing and murdered folks that we're looking for. You can also get the Missing Children Society app. So we've had more information published when it comes to the drug crisis, and our numbers are new records being set all the time. If you know somebody that's using substances, please do not use alone. If you are using alone, you can use the National Overdose Response Service at 888-688-NORS for support, or you can download the the Brave or Doors app. I've also heard about a lifeguard app, but it's not really for Edmonton or for Alberta. It sounds like it's more for BC. Anyway, if you're experiencing emotional distress after anything we talked about today, please call the First Nation and Inuit Hope for Wellness helpline at 1-855-242-3310. You can also go to hopeforwellness.ca if related to missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit. You can call 844-413-6649. The Indian Residential School Survivors and Family Hotline is 866-925-4419. The Native Youth Crisis Hotline is 877-209-1266. For non-Indigenous, there are distress center lines in your area, usually a functioning 211. You can also call 833-456-4566, or you can even text at 45645. If looking for more, you can go to crisisservicescanada.ca. and the Kids Help Phone 1-800-668-6868. The following are 2S LGBTQ crisis supports. So you can go to lifevoice.ca where they have tons of crisis support information. The Trans Lifeline is 877-330-6366. And the Trevor Project is for LGBTQ youth is 866-844-7386. Violence is my everyday reality. Every Indigenous generation has faced it. This is media representation we don't get. It's self-care, how I take my power back. That's why I started this podcast, to speak freely without interruption, tone police, leadership shaming, gaslighting questions, as many people don't want to hear Indigenous opinions, but sure like to tell us theirs, even though they know nothing about us, understanding their own settler colonial bias. They know nothing about the constant surveillance of Indigenous people, our protests, our vigil, and our rights. I and many others have shared info on microaggressions daily. It's unacceptable anymore, folks. Learn about being trauma-informed. Folks like me are dealing with internalized racism and gatekeeping, folks that survive off the status quo, and people who are so in their trauma that they stop people from doing the work and deplete personal resources. Internal and external racism is an everyday reality for me, Indigenous peoples, folks with disabilities, QT BIPOC, and others. I want to say thank you to my ancestors, to my granny and my mom, what strength looks like through your example. I want to thank my dad for teaching me to be strong and blunt, my stepmom for showing me a proud culture through her Austrian family and roots, and teaching me to be a proud Calgarian. I want to say thank you to my husband for producing and editing this show, on top of being my husband, my childhood friend, father of our child, and my support down the road of, unpacking racism and sexism. He has witnessed all of it. And to our child, we are blessed to learn from you daily, and we are honored you chose us. You give me daily accountability to be a better and stronger person. I hope that my daughter and my family will be proud in the future of me trying to discuss these present day issues. My Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you can pledge and support. Thank you to everyone who has showed support before. I just want to say I don't receive funding for this show at all. And because I find that in the moment you do, this is a moment you have to center the feelings of your funders. And that is so icky and gross. And especially when we're talking about genocide and oppression by Canadians who are willfully trying to avoid the fact that they are complicit in it. So if you think what I have to say is important, please, give us some money. We would appreciate it. We totally are based on donations. And I don't normally endorse, and I don't go around begging foreign companies to pay me, because that's stupid. So, and I just don't think it's ethical. Like I'm not clickbait. I'm just telling my story. If y'all want to pay attention, great. If you don't, you don't. I did come across this Métis-owned business called Three Sisters, and they have a magnesium body butter. So good. And they just threw in a Two-Spirit soap bar, and of course my little Two-Spirit loves it. So and when I say little, my little one that's bigger than me taller than I am by a mile anyway, they loved it. So just a shout out to Three Sisters. I don't normally do product endorsement, but I just really enjoyed their product, and because they're Métis owned, just give them a shout out. And I got that locally. Right now a lot of the Indigenous markets are going to be coming up for Christmas. I've been sharing them on my social media. So now is the time to go buy things that you can, donate to or gift to someone Indigenous in your life later, and just help support in local Indigenous economy. Anyway, I want to end by giving side eye to those beautiful Calgary rabbits. You're lucky I'm not tradish. And my beautiful cousin would respond, "Are you be in my dish?" So thanks, folks, for listening. I appreciate it very much.